Frosty beverage. We're live. It is 7:12. Hopefully everybody's doing good. Got a lot of stuff done today, and it's nice when you start working on stuff and you're able to achieve some stuff. So that today worked out pretty good. But tonight I wanted to talk about, and we'll start this going here. You can see we got a 671 blower, 2 Holley carburetors, pretty typical stuff. Those were actually blower carburetors that we ran, and we ran it on a small block Chevy. So we'll let this thing kind of scroll through here. The test motor was a Blueprint 383. I think this is one of their power adder motors. It was 9-to-1, 383 stroker from the guys at Blueprint. It had forged internals, aluminum heads, as you can see in here. It had a small camshaft in it, a 536, 555 lift, enough for the aluminum heads. 224, 236 on a 113. When we ran this thing naturally aspirated, we ran it with an Edelbrock RPM air gap. Like you do, pretty good combination for a 383 and that size camshaft. The 750 Holley or long tube headers, you know, MSD, kind of typical stuff, roller rockers on it. And it did well. As we can see, we can show some of the power stuff here. Back up just a little bit. We can see the NA power output around 450. And the boosted power output, we added an easy 100. Went up to 600 horsepower, so we went from 450 to 600. And then we do what we do, adding even more boost to it. We can get, you know, I think ultimately what ended up on this thing is once we ran E85 on it, we tried a bunch of different pulleys on this thing, and I want to show you a photo of the pulleys here. We were monitoring charge temperature, get the blower on there, the dual carbs, the carb adapters. So what I want to talk about is, and I'd mentioned this before, but when I was down at West Tech this time, when we were doing all the turbo testing with Jimmy and from Richard Holder Performance, I keep wanting to say from HP Performance, but he is from HP Performance. I have pulleys for sale, not particularly from this one, but these types of blower pulleys. And I have, I think, 4 different sizes because I have 2 that are the same. I have a 38 tooth pulley, a 37 tooth pulley, and 2 34 tooth pulleys. So you can do all sorts of mixing and matching with different kinds of combinations. When we ran this thing, when it made, I think it made 11.5 pounds, we had a 37 and a 38. So we had a 37 top and a 38 bottom. You could go even faster than that if you put a 34 on the bottom, put a 38 on the top, and put a 34 on the bottom. You could, you know, spin it even faster if you want. And then obviously there are other pulleys if you really wanted to spin this thing up. What this thing really liked was being, you know, spun a little faster. This is a 9-to-1 383, so it's not going to be super stellar with that camshaft. It has Blueprint aluminum heads on it. There are obviously other heads that you could put on here. You could go with an airflow research head, trick flow, that kind of thing, and obviously make more power. And there's wilder camshafts, so you could, you know, you could steam this thing up without any problem at all. The blower will certainly support more. In fact, on these blowers, with a good blower shop blower, we've made close to 1,000 horsepower with the 671, as long as it's good and it's a stripped one, and you know it's got all that stuff. It's, if you were going to try to do that, I would just recommend just get an 871 rather than a 671. But when this thing was run on E85 with these 2 carburetors, or rather with E85 carburetors, we ran this thing and made a fairly easy 700 horsepower. And you know, the nice thing about E85 when you're running on these, and even to some extent when you're running fuel on, there's, you know, you can see condensation on the blower because they really like running cool, which when you elevate the boost pressure on these things, they just don't, they're not happy. A Roots blower is not a happy camper, really high pressures. But when you get charge cooling, which they get from fuel by running fuel through the blower, but certainly even more so with E85, they just get, they tend to get a lot happier. So 700 horsepower, not a problem at all with this combination. Like I said, we've made way more than that with this type of blower. This particular combination was a 9-to-1 383. And it was done basically, I think that this is another one of the editor kind of things from back in the day. And I think that this was just designed to go in a driver that has a big blower sticking out of the hood and looks cool, but drives around really nice and stuff. So like I said, a 224 cam, not very big on a 383, and worked well with a blower, had the kind of idle that the guy wanted and stuff. And then the nice thing about blowers with all of them is that you can adjust, how much personality you want to put into the combination just by changing the pulley. So you could have it be like 3 pounds of boost. You could have it be 23 pounds of boost, as long as you have enough, pulley to change that around. And the nice thing about these is that it's really easy to change the pulleys on these. I mean, they just bolt on and off, and I don't think that we had to make changes in the belt size when we were doing that. I think we had enough tension or adjustment to just make it work. And on these cog belts, you don't have to tension them. You don't have to tension the snot out of them to get them to work. You just put some tension in it. And it's interesting. You can see a little bit of chordal action going on, a little bit of sine wavage going on. But the nice thing, like I said, about the cog stuff is it's not going to slip. This was a cool test because, let's face it, a small block Chevy with a roots blower on there, it looks like it's supposed to be there. And then if you could, if you have the hood with a hole in it, you can have this thing sticking out of the hood, and it has lots of presence. Even if, let's say we made 700 horsepower, and it's really easy to do that kind of number with any kind of turbocharged and cammed LS motor. A junkyard 5.3 with a cam and a turbo is going to do that at next to nothing. In fact, we just did a bunch of testing with it, and it was like, pretty easily 10 or 11 pounds or whatever. And it's making that kind of power. So, and that's not even on, oh no, I take that back. That was on the 85, but pretty easy to do in terms of the power output, but it doesn't say the same thing that this does. Like I said, if you got a cool car and you're driving to Cars and Coffee or whatever, and you want to just kind of roast the tires and stuff, just this kind of thing is easy to do. Plus you can drive around and everybody just, it's like having one of those specialized cars that everybody looks at and points at. It's just got a lot of cool factor going on to it, and that's why we like putting those on. Although lifting those things up on there for the intake swap, they're fairly hefty. It's not like lifting an iron one, but still they are fairly hefty. But the thing did well. I'll go ahead and run this thing out so we can kind of see the power curves. But if anybody's interested, please send me an email. I'll go ahead and put my email down here. Or we are going to post these at richardoldnerperformance.com. We're going to post these up in the garage sale section of the store, so they will be there available. And I brought them home, so if somebody is interested in them and they want to order them, I could just send them out right away because I have them. The last time I mentioned these, they were down in storage down near West Tech, and I just didn't have access to them. I didn't know what different pulley teeth numbers I had, and I didn't know how many of them were there. And so now I know all that, got them here, they're ready to go out. So if anybody's interested, please let me know. And like I said, I'll go ahead and put my email address down there, and you guys can get that going. But very cool stuff. The nice thing, like always with any kind of boost, it's, hey, can we make, lots more power? Yes, we can. If we're doing NA stuff, hey, what happens if we put headers on, or what happens if we put a different set of cylinder heads on, or what happens if we put a different camshaft on? Yeah, we're getting power gains and all that's working out okay. But when we put boost on, it's like, oh, here's a big giant chunk of power. Here's hundreds of horsepower changes instead of 5s and 10s or whatever that we would normally get. So the blower stuff is kind of nice, or any kind of boost, whether you put turbos on it, whatever it is, centrifugal blowers, this 671, all of those are, kind of awesome. And that's the great thing about it. And then, like I said, with a blower, you just change the pulley and, you're making more power. Hey, look, here's another 10, 15, 20, 30, 50, whatever it is. And that's the nice thing about boost. You're saying with a turbo, hey, look, this 8 pounds is really good, but it'd be really good, like 10 pounds and then 12 and then 15 and then 20 and then blow it up. That happens a lot. Nitrous is kind of the same way too. Hey, let's run 100 shot and then 150 and then 200 shot and all that stuff. It's a lot harder to do NA, and you'll get a lot of the NA guys that build engines. Oh yeah, if you need boost, you haven't built your NA right. Well, okay, look, build your best NA motor and just come show it to me. That's great. Now add 10 pounds to it and then tell me what it does. it's going to do something wonderful. But it gets harder and harder to make more and more power when you have an NA combination. But if you just add boost to it, then no matter what you're adding boost to, you're going to end up looking like a hero. So it's kind of good stuff. We'll see what you guys got going on tonight on Sunday. This is nice. Got a little bit of a vacation here, so that's kind of cool. But you guys let me know if anybody's interested in. Also, I have lots of that Pontiac stuff. I've got the transmission stuff trying to get rid of for that young lady. So anybody interested in that, please let me know. We got the Muncie 4-speed, a bunch of cylinder heads, and just various things. Tim, what's going on? Tomlinson's in the house. Special agent. Howdy, howdy. Nice and warm. It was nice today. The sun was out. It was great. Moving air since the 1880s. Wow, that was. It's back in the day. Frosty Gold beverage. What's up, everybody? Love the articles here at Summit. Are you Sin City? Do you work at Summit Racing? I do lots of stuff with the guys from Summit. I like the guys at Summit. Jet Black, Sin City. Good evening, fellas. Freedom's in the house. We like to have freedom, right? Everybody enjoys their good freedom. Wow, I think I showed up before the last 5 minutes. Look at that. See, you're here. You're here early, man. Good to see everyone. It's been a while. Lots of overtime to get the 68 Impala painted. That's the way to do it, man, right? You work hard, you get stuff. Yeah, you got to get that paper. That's cool. We need a promo code for Sin City. Got my hands full. I'm actually thinking about doing some Summit gift card giveaways. So I got that. We got that coming up. We need off the back of the truck special. It fell off the back of the truck. I love that. It's my favorite. It's one of my favorite lines in the movie. Where'd you get that? Fell off the truck. Those are good trucks to follow. Super G Summit code. What do you think max pressure on pump gas should be with 9.8 to 1 compression and aluminum heads? On what kind of motor? And I need to know a little bit more about what's going on there. The compression the static compression doesn't really determine the detonation threshold. And that's really what you're asking about. And is the pump gas you're asking about, is it pump E85? Is it pump 93? Is it pump 91? And whose aluminum heads? Every aluminum head is going to have a different detonation threshold. Let's support the community that supports Summit. That's right. I'm a big fan of Summit. I think their customer service is excellent. So shout out to the Summit guys. So we'll put a little post up here for the Summit guys. Summit rules. There we go. Boom. Boomla boomla. Somebody tell me what movie that's from. Are the 799 heads too small for a 408 stroker with a truck Norris cam? No, you're fine. I mean, you'll make more power with ported heads, but that camshaft is mild enough on a 408, particularly that you're not trying to maximize the power output of the 408 by doing that. You're 20 or 30 degrees of duration away from maximizing the power output of a 408. What cam would you suggest? An LS 383 running 85 and S480 turbo going in a Fox body drag race primarily. So the 383 is not going to matter. The S480 is going to determine the power output. I don't know which one you have, but a lot of those can be, 1,200 horsepower turbos, let's say. And that's what you're going to make, whether it's a 4.8 or a 5.3 or a 383, doesn't matter, particularly with the 85, because you can use all the boost and all the timing. I'm hoping that it's intercooled also. You can max the turbo out with literally hundreds and hundreds of different camshafts. So that's not an issue. And what you're asking about on the turbo thing is, I would be more interested in what else you want the cam to do. Like, do you have a stall converter? Is it a stock converter? Is it a street driver? If it's drag race primarily, do you have a big stall? And how high do you want to rev this thing? What intake is on it? All of that stuff is going to help determine what camshaft you want. Particularly the intake manifold. Hoping to have my hands full soon. Been working on something not fun, but hoping to get some fun stuff soon. Those Blueprint engines are a beautiful platform. I like the Blueprint stuff. Every one that I've run, we've run the 540s, we've run the 383s, we've run the 400s, we've run the LS stuff, and we've run the small block Ford stuff, I think. And all of them have worked out really well. They're a good like starting platform. And when we're talking about crate engines like that, it's just like the easy button. You just pay the money and this crate shows up at your house. It's already built. It's already ready to go. It looks good. It's clean. It doesn't look like my wrecking yard motors. It's kind of nice, but they only go, it seems like they only go to the editors back in the day. Good to see you, Rich and crew. I'm outside in the single digits working in the Civic. I like to see it get away. That's good. Like to see that dedication. Single above or single below. That's good. Wow. He just like stepped up his game a little bit there. 6 below outside. Nah, it's still 52 right now here. Does anyone make a twin screw pack that looks like a 671? I don't know if anybody made an external one that looks like a 671. I haven't seen that. But a twin screw would be nice because then it would be a lot more efficient. I think that Whipple made some twin screws that go on to 671 manifolds, if I remember right. I believe it's about 6 degrees out here in Maryville, Indiana, or 9. Can't remember. I'm outside of my phone. Just turn your phone upside down, then you can tell whether it's a 6 or a 9. Not supercharged, but I have the 462 in my Pontiac running flex fuel with my Holly. That's good. 462s are good. I should do that because I have a 400 block. Close to that in Jordan, Illinois. Central Iowa, bit of wind too. Yeah, the wind is bad. I'm basically in Gary, Indiana, next to Lake Michigan. It's got to be cold up there. I like boost. Likes me some E85. Just 1 more pound. Just 2 would really be good, right? 100-year-old house doesn't keep all the wind out either. The dogs help. And then blow it up. That's it. Richard, you have the camera chirp? That's probably, let's see if I can get one of these to stop doing that. How's that? Is that any better? I have chirping in the background because we have frogs too. The frogs are out in full effect right now. You still doing any mod motor stuff? I haven't run a mod motor in a long time. Aaron, you need a pre-Eagle Hemi-Cam? I think I have one of the 273 comp ones. Mod motor crew, donuts in a curb. I just wanted to live in nice places like Des Moines. Summit rules. Who said that? Yeah, that's me. Out here, let me start our thing again. 671s. Yeah, what's up? Any idea on turbo exhaust setup for a 4x4 truck? Yes, it should have one. We got room, pack up and come over. I don't know. I honestly don't know what, if you have a single turbo or a dual turbo. You just need to run the exhaust out of the turbo, and then on a 4x4 truck, you should have a lot of room to run exhaust on it. Pump gas from the airport, yeah, that's also good. Although I would argue that the 100 or whatever that you get there is not. That's not near. I would never run that over E85. Summit always for me 90% of the time. The always and the 90 go together. The always is a percentage. Richard, does a supercharger work the same as a turbo in the manner of the camshaft makes a motor what it does and not the supercharger? On a supercharge application, typically I would run more camshaft in it, particularly on a centrifugal blower because it wants more RPM than turbos do traditionally. So I do that because the centrifugal supercharger continues to add boost with RPM. And so if we could put an intake manifold on there and a camshaft on there that gets it to run more RPM, which is not what I would normally do with the turbo. I'm about 25 miles north, 35 miles to work each way. Sin City, happy to help, man. Say what's up to all the Summit peeps. 799 heads on an LQ4 with a red hot cam. Yes, I think that's a good idea. I myself would pick a hot rod cam, but the red hot cam would be fine. I would put a good intake manifold on it, like I'd put a Trailblazer SS, which we have at richardholderperformance.com. I think Jimmy's put them up by now. You know, Jegs would be jealous, but but they lack self-awareness. You ever cannonball 24 hours on the Autobahn? I don't know where you could run for 24 hours on any Autobahn. 24 hours at speed anywhere would be, I don't think you could do that anywhere, because you'd run out of gas, and also there just isn't enough length of that to make that happen. How much RPM can the 195 aluminum AFR head support on a small block Chevy? I don't know, the website says 6,400. I see people say it's more. Yeah, the cylinder head doesn't know RPM. It doesn't understand that. The only thing that would limit RPM in the cylinder head is spring rate. So the spring rate might limit RPM because it's going to limit the kind of camshaft that you can put in. But if you put enough, the right kind of spring and the right kind of cam, a 195 head will run to 9,000 RPM if you want to run it there. Should I put back stock cam in my 92 Mustang if it has stock heads? No, you can gain power with aftermarket cams, even with stock heads. You just don't get as much of a gain. So do you like the way that it drives? If you like the way the stock one drives, or if you have a stock converter and you want just good drivability like a stock motor, that's fine. But just because you have stock heads doesn't mean you have to have a stock cam. Lots of guys have run cams on stock heads. You just have to change the springs on it. I have a 2,000 mile LS3, nice. Manly stroker kit, ported L92 heads, all that's good. If I were to combine these with the VVT L92 cam and ECU and all stock emissions controls, do you think I could pass California emissions for an L92? I'm the wrong guy to ask about any of that. I don't know how. I don't think that that's technically legal, but I don't know. You'd have to check with a ref station or something. 6,501 RPM, that's right. It's 5 degrees outside. Yeah, it's -40. Oh, in Edmonton. Yeah. So you win, Scott. Rob, long time no join. Love the torque curve. I've been on the Autobahn. Unless you go at 2 a.m., there's traffic all the time. Yeah, the Autobahn thing was really kind of a thing. And even I would argue simply for short bursts of very, very high speed, like way back in the day, like in the 80s or something. But there's just too many people everywhere. And like I said, you can't just go unlimited for a long period of time. I remember a guy telling me, yeah, I went from here to Palm Springs or whatever, Dallas to Palm Springs or whatever he was telling me. I'm like, yeah, that's great. And you did it in this period of time, in this amount of time. We did the calculations. Yeah, it's like 176 mile an hour average. That's pretty good considering you in your Trans Am with its 15-gallon fuel cell or tank or whatever, they did like 8 stops. So yeah, that didn't happen. 273 will work. I'll hit you up. Yeah, Aaron, just send me an email. I think we do have one of those. Smaller would be better. I'm pretty sure I don't have any smaller ones. On the 4x4, I meant routing exhaust from the passenger side to feed a single turbo. Well, the only obstacle in routing the exhaust over, like I don't know if you're routing it from a stock exhaust manifold over into merge it into some other exhaust manifold that has a provision for that. You have to merge them together and then feed some sort of Y pipe. A lot of times it's done in the other side exhaust manifold. So it merges into that, like the Holley stuff that we see, or they make them for small blocks. They make them for lots of different stuff. So if you can do that, otherwise they just need to join together wherever you're going to mount the turbo. And then you need a down pipe exiting out of that turbo. There needs to be room for all that to happen, for all that tubing rigmarole. And then you need a discharge tube going to possibly an intercooler, I guess, or if not an intercooler, then into the throttle body or carburetor. If not, then to an intercooler and then out of the intercooler and then back into said carburetor or throttle body. For a 4x4 supercharger would likely be a better choice. Lower rev, smoother in most cases. Do you prefer comp Howards or Brian Tooley cams generally for cam choice? For what application? I have my own cams that we run on a lot of stuff, but on the LS stuff, I think I would pick Brian Pulley right now. I don't think I've tried a lot of Howard's LS cams. I've tried other stuff that they've done. I've run obviously a lot of comp stuff. I was just on the site and didn't see the intake manifold. Okay, I'll talk to Jimmy. Mr. Dyno, how are you doing? That monster motor would look good in my Avalanche. Oh, the blower motor? Yeah, that would good look good and everything. I'm gonna run to 95,000 RPM. Just kidding. 95,000 would be a lot. It'd be right up there. I mean, if you're gonna go there, you might as well go 100, because then you have another like comma, which is good. I was offered an LY6 block internals for 800 today. I'm waiting till I go to the junkyard first. Motors are only 250 to 300 from the wrecking yard. It depends on what wrecking yard, but yeah, they can be that low. And you don't really need an LY6 block. You can get an LQ4 and LQ9, which you sometimes can find in wrecking yards. It's like the one time I went 300 miles an hour on my 650 Ninja. That's really fast Ninja. I having owned a 600 Ninja, they are fast. I don't know about that fast, but most people have no clue how much fuel an engine burns at full throttle, especially if it's making over 600 horsepower. Yeah. Richard, I got an L92 with a centrifugal cam with an LSA. Don't know what kind of power to expect. What do you think? I think yes. I would need to know what cam is. I don't care that it was done for a centrifugal. You just tell me the specs on the cam. It will also work with that LSA blower. Downpipe is a hard part, in my opinion. Big pipe, ideally, and hot. Yeah, sometimes it's hard to snake the pipe over from one side to the other and then get the exhaust pipe down past that. Sometimes on four-wheel drive stuff, it's you have room, but you just have to see how much real estate you have. Day 18,300 and counting. Where would you suggest getting one? Look at his reviews and the price range you have. I'm scrolling back to see what they were talking about. Oh, a blower would be a better choice. Yeah, what did you tell us what motor that is? 1800, 18,300? If I have an NA combo with a big cam, 242, 248. When I go turbo, I would go smaller cam spool. Yeah, the turbo determines how much power you make, not that camshaft. You don't need a camshaft that's that big. So I would go smaller in the camshaft to get more dynamic range from the turbo. I'd want it to spool up. Changing the cam size on your 1,000 horsepower turbo just means the 1,000 horsepower turbo activates earlier. You still get the 1,000 horsepower. It just starts coming on sooner than with that 242 cam. Have you ever heard of 100 unleaded race gas throwing a catalytic converter code? I don't ever remember running that on something that would have a converter on it. 6.2, okay, 2002 ZL1, okay. Yeah, if it's a four-wheel drive, they're right. You might think about a TVS 2650 or some kind of blower on it. Although there is a company that's coming out with blowers or with turbos that I think will equal the low-speed torque of a Root supercharger. That's right. You heard it here. Emperor, thank you very much. My motor is 9.8 to 1, 383, and the cam is a hydraulic roller, 248, 245, 255, 50. About where would the power band be, and will the springs that come in the eliminator head support it? I don't know which springs you have in the eliminator heads. I would have to look those up. A 245 cam is pretty big. What intake manifold does this thing have on it? And you don't have to worry about, like a 245 cam, you don't have to worry about revving it past the ability of those heads. We run that kind of cam with a 195 eliminator head. I need to look and see exactly what springs you have, but the airflow research guys will know what they put in there. The guys at West Tech have a 372 that has that kind of cam in it and with single plane manifolds on it and runs. I mean, it's got hundreds and hundreds of runs on it, so that's not an issue. Higher octane can be hard on cats. Why is the octane? Why are the cats affected by octane? Electric turbos. I don't think a turbo is electric. I think a supercharger can be electric. I would argue that if it's a turbo, that it's not, and it's electrically driven. I would argue that it's a supercharger. I can't just hit the cool turbo and move on. Yeah, I can, because we're not releasing that until all the turbos are ready. It's about a 4x4 application. You can spec a turbo for that, but it's still like the tried and true supercharger for that. Okay, that's fine. Yeah, everybody, that's why we have more than one thing available to us, so that we have the option for that, because we get to choose. That's the great thing about living here. How much boost would you safely add to hyper-detecting pistons in a weekend car? No big bang. What motor is it? Like, whose hyper-detecting pistons are they? Are they stock ones? Are you talking about a cast piston, or did you buy an aftermarket hyper-detecting piston? And the boost doesn't matter. What matters is detonation. Boosted leaded fuels are hard on sensors and cats, but just high octane unleaded doesn't hurt components. Yeah, I don't think that the octane really has an effect. I need that flavor of the week turbo. It just has to be under 400 for journal 7875. Be around 4,000, 9,000 without knowing more. Rather have a supercharger too. Just not sure which one or where to buy them. Yeah, you could go the Tom DeMuse or SWS route and put, like that 2.3 liter Ford that we had for the Coyote on there, or the stuff from the GT500, or a TVS would give you more than enough power. I don't know how much power you want, but a TVS, a 2300 or a 2650 would give you all the power that you could use. I just don't know if that's what you want. Like, I don't know, do you need 1,000 horsepower, or are you only looking for 600 or 700? I used 4812 AFR air gap intake. It's rated to 7,000. Yeah, the rating thing that you're talking about is not accurate. An air gap, if it's is it a dual plane intake manifold, or is it a single plane? That's what I want to know. I don't think the octane matters much to the cats. The only reason I could see high octane being hard on cats is if you have low combustion engine that isn't using the octane, therefore not fully burning fuels. Well, you're missing something there. The burn rate and octane don't have a causal relationship. Those things are independent. So a lot of people think that if you have high octane, it changes the air fuel and it changes the burn rate. It doesn't do any of that. It changes the detonation threshold. High octane at the pump is leaded, says right on it. High octane at the pump. So like 90, you're saying 91 octane, high octane is leaded? Or are you saying at the airport? Richard, do you torque head bolts, Stan? What do you torque head bolts on a 5.3 LS? Are you talking about ARP head bolts or stock ones? On stock ones, I follow the stock torque sequence. If I'm just doing it really fast, and we're just running like cylinder heads and all I have are stock head bolts on it, and we're running a bunch of cylinder heads, I would just put them at 65 and run it, and then take them off. Wizard, only 650? Yeah, you can easily do that with a small blower. Anyone have any small block Ford heads you want to get rid of? Gasoline is a really complicated mix of stuff. Certainly possible. Emperor, yeah, if it's a dual plane and you have, there's so many things I'm trying to keep in my head here. If it's a dual plane and a 383, you're not going to be making power at 6,000 or 6,500 RPM anyways. Well, you're not going to be making power at peak power at 7,000 RPM. You might be making it at 6,500. I can take a look and see if I have some of that data from the Westech motor, but a dual plane is not going to be making power up there. So block intake test. Here we go. Dual plane, a single plane. Oh, I take that back. Well, this makes peak power earlier than that. It makes peak power at 6,500 on the dual plane. But it carries that out. It made more with a single plane, but it makes more with a single plane past 4,800. What the hell did they test this on? That's not that. That's not. Oh, no wonder. That's his engine master's motor. That's a 410 thing. That's not an accurate depiction of what's going on. Let's see here. Let's see here. I'll be able to tell you finally, final. Test description. So on the 372, and this is with a 227 head, it's making peak power like at 6,400. If catalytic converters overheat bad, the honeycomb ceramic catalyst will melt. 100 plus, I can get 110 at the pump here. Where do you get that at? Yeah, and 110 is definitely going to be leaded. 100 unleaded is the most I know of. I'm late to the party. Do you have an opinion on my last comment on your video about electric driven turbo and the reduction of exhaust back pressure? An electric driven, like I said, an electric driven turbo is a supercharger in my opinion and not a turbo. A turbo is driven by the exhaust. But if you don't use exhaust to drive the supercharger, you would have a reduction in back pressure because there wouldn't be any. There would be no back pressure. Because like on a supercharger, what's driven off of the crank or driven off of an electric motor, there's no back pressure anymore. The pump said 100 unleaded, but maybe they made a mistake. I only mix 5 gallons to give 91 octane a bump. In California and Arizona, the premium is only 91. Pump gas isn't leaded anymore, but airplane gas still is. Yeah, at the airport. Does the exhaust smell sweet at all? If so, it's leaded. High octane pump gas is leaded 100. I actually like the 100 that we used to test, the Rocket brand stuff. That 100 was good. Because it was oxygenated and it made a little bit more power. Emperor, it's a good idea to limit to 7,200. Steel retainers used. Titanium retainers will add 500 RPM. That I've never seen that. That seems like a lot. Cam Grinder told me it would need a 2800 stall, and that's what I've got for it. Do you think it would be enough for a custom stall? No, 2800 is probably fine. At work, we mix 5 gallons of unleaded race fuel with 20 gallons of 91. Free for the showroom bikes. Drain the carb after 5 years, put fresh fuel in. They fire right up. In my area, we haven't had emissions for 10 years. We get 110 at the pump for off-road use. Okay. Takes a lot of leaded gas to clog cats. The other problem with leaded gas is it's bad on O2 sensors. That it will definitely hurt those. But not immediately. I know when Westech runs that stuff, when they were running some leaded stuff, like leaded race gas, they would run that and then they would run pump 91 through it, hoping that maybe you know, giving a little spritz of unleaded would help it out. Plus it lubricates all of those valve seats for all those fuely heads, right? Yeah. Fuely head, Joe. Here, we got to get this going again. Blower stuff. I got to keep that going. Wah, wah, wah. Dual plane. Yeah, where did that thing make peak power at? That was a pretty small cam, though. What I like is running these motors. Usually as the baseline, we run some sort of stock cam in them. We run them with a stock cam and then run them with either headers or stock exhaust manifolds, but mufflers on it. So you run it with a stock cam and mufflers on it, and with a stock cam, the way that they idle, just sitting there, you're like, I don't even realize that motor is running. It's like in whisper mode. We quit using titanium retainers and cut because the debris ended up all throughout the engine from getting in the oil. Yeah, they will. Stuff will come off of them from rubbing on the springs. Computer rattlesnake is talkative tonight. Electric-driven boost is a supercharger. Doesn't a supercharger require a crank to drive? So it's a variable pressure depending on RPM, just like a turbo. So I'm not sure why you say that. I say that because a turbo is driven off of the exhaust. A turbo is not driven off of an electric motor. That's what I dictate as a supercharger. That's my definition of it. That's why I say that. But when you're driving something off of, forget about what you call it. When you're driving something off of an electric motor, you can spin it as slow or as fast as you want relative to engine speed. The engine speed is no longer a function of anything. So if you can spin it as fast as you want at any engine speed and produce any boost level that you want, to me, that's a supercharger. But regardless, it will have no back pressure. It has no back pressure in the exhaust. I mean, it just has whatever the exhaust would normally have on a very high specific output naturally aspirated combination. So if you're running it under boost and now you're not making 400 horsepower, you're making 800 horsepower because you have 15 pounds of boost, you might have a little bit more back pressure in the header or the exhaust system, but not anything like you would have with a turbo setup where you have the turbo between the cylinder head, you know, where you have that exhaust there. You're not going to have back pressure like that. I drove from my house to my dad's 520 miles away and averaged slightly over 100 miles an hour in my Camaro with a 5.7 TPI. 500 miles averaging 100 miles an hour is pretty fast on a public road in Mexico. I'm sure that this was. What you say is the weight difference between a small block Chevy 350 with aluminum heads, long block versus an LS1, trying to see how much I stand to save. I don't know. Does anybody know the weights on those? If the only change you make to an LS3 to 416 cubic inches, how much would emissions be affected? Don't have any idea. 3,500 sounds about as low as I would try. I've heard that titanium retainers maybe aren't the best choice. Got those for my 5.3, and I'm sure I'm overthinking it. Is there any actual worries about this? No, not for what you're doing. You're fine. People like to argue about nitpicky things, and that's not an issue. How much difference in weight? Maybe 20 pounds. I'm assuming iron block LS with aluminum heads. Where you'd save some weight is the composite manifold on the LS if you're talking about iron stuff on both of them. Plan to use it as a street strip truck, 373 gear, hook up to turbo 400 with a reverse manual valve body. Use beehive springs and steel retainers. Yeah, the difference between a titanium retainer and a steel retainer on the size retainer that you have for a beehive spring is like next to nothing. And I know when Brian was telling me that when they did testing on the Spintron, that the steel retainers were actually a little better. Have you ever done anything with Mr. Forced Performance, Robert Young. Yeah, I've spoken to Robert a few times on the phone. He's a good guy. He's smart. I like Robert. Have VS Racing twin mirror images 78, 75. Should I run a single on my LS3 or twins? Well, twin 78, 75s are like 2,000 horsepower with the turbo. So is that what you're trying to do? Tell me how much power you're trying to run, and we'll let you know which one of those two you should run. Steve Morse uses some electronic boost gates on his wagon to control boost pressure at idle, spooling the turbos harder. But is he using an electronic wastegate? Is that what you're talking about? He's not using electric motors to spin it, right? An electric wastegate is a different thing. I'm thinking that using an electric booster with those E-gates would be the ticket. Yeah, you're welcome to do whatever you want to do. Titanium to steel was 5 grams in favor of the titanium. Yeah, 5 grams is not really very much. Emperor, happy to help. Has GM or Ford experimented with electric turbos? They're doing it. They did it in Formula One. I don't know if it's carried over yet. I thought Porsche was doing it, but I don't know about the domestic OEMs. The last Mercedes-AMG cars use a turbo with an integrated electric motor. It uses the motor to spool faster and also generates electricity when coasting to recharge the battery. If you're, in that instance, if you're using exhaust to drive the turbo and augmenting that with an electric motor to increase shaft speed when there's not exhaust pressure doing that, that's a turbo. If you have the compressor hooked up to just an electric motor and you're not driving it by the exhaust, to me, that's a supercharger. One of them is driven by the exhaust and one of them is not. I'm doing big wheel racing on 26-inch rims, like a big wheel, like the ones that you ride down the street. I know you're talking about donks and stuff. I have an LS3 currently with an LSA blower, not making too much power. Would like to put a turbo on it, also running a turbo 400. Turbos compared to an LSA blower would be hundreds of horsepower more. Thought some of the new Porsches use the E-turbos. I thought that they did too. It's kind of cool that you can, keep that thing spooled up. I just don't think that that's carrying over to like the $400 turbo aftermarket at any time soon, though. I don't think it's just like, oh, well, free valve is the way to go. Yeah, it would be cool to dial in whatever cam profile you want, but we're not going to have that in the wrecking yard. Out of the different fuel injection systems, which have you found to be the easiest to install and add power outers to? I'm the wrong guy to ask that because I'm not a tuner and I haven't tested all of those. I should say this. I have run the Holly, HP, and Dominator stuff and the Terminator stuff. That's all kind of the same. I have not run a Phytech. I've not run an Edelbrock ProFlow that I can remember. I have run the MSD, not run an Aces. I have run an MS3 Pro with help from Eric. I have run the Fast originally. And what else? Oh, I'm about to run a Heltec. So those I have run, but I'm not the right guy to pick that because any of those fuel injection systems for what I'm doing on the engine dyno, here, click, 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 click. Hey, look, wide open throttle. Look, here we need to add more fuel. We need to take away fuel. What I'm doing on the engine dyno is really, really easy and really, really fast. I'm not utilizing what all of those things have to offer when we're running wide open throttle, and they'll all do that. Australia's in the house. 496 versus 602 Chevy. Which one makes more power? There's a guy here on YouTube that compound turbo with electric motors. Can't remember his channel. Yeah, I don't know what you mean. I I like the technology. Like, I really like Formula One stuff, but a lot of that stuff does not trickle down to us, or at least not at any, you know, we won't see that in the very foreseeable future here. If you go back to the turbo era of Formula One, we've seen some of that stuff. We have turbos, which is good. Did you do a 602 on the dyno? What is it? I've never run a 602-inch motor on the dyno. I think we did. I think Blueprint or somebody had 598s that we ran. I think we did those, but not. It wasn't. I don't think it was a 602. And I don't remember what configuration that was in. I think that Engine Masters was using that motor to test some different things like cylinder heads and stuff. We just did an electric turbo a couple of years ago on a small Chevy. It worked pretty good, but it couldn't control boost at low RPM. I have seen guys, or there's a guy on YouTube running a centrifugal supercharger that's driven by an electric motor. Now, that's not a turbo, that's a blower being driven by an electric motor. And so, unlike a centrifugal typically, which runs much less boost down low and then lots of boost at the top, he's able to speed the blower way up. So he's able, you know, if it, let's say it makes peak flow and peak power at, let's pick a number, say 70,000 RPM. So using the electric motor, if he could spin it to 70,000 RPM at 2,000 RPM engine speed, then he has all the boost that he could possibly use. In fact, he would have way more at 2,000 RPM if he spun at the same speed than he would at 7,000 RPM running that same blower speed, because the motor would be using more. So he can control that. And as long as you have, you know, as long as you have this thing calibrated properly, where you decide how much blower speed you want and therefore airflow and boost, you could also regulate that with a blow-off valve or a wastegate valve. Anything that opens and bleeds it off, you could regulate that. And as long as you have a control system that allows you to do that, you could determine how much boost you have. That's a neat thing. The problem is the electric motor that's required to do that takes a lot of power. .602 is a circle track class. I know the 602 small blocks. I've run those before, but I thought that he was talking about a 602 big block. That's why I suggest Steve Morse e-boost skates on the intake side. Have you ever done throttle body size differences? Yes, we have done throttle bodies on draw-through supercharged stuff, which shows a big difference in power because they want more air inlet and then they produce more boost. Do you have any good calculators you use to help determine certain power on a build? No, for me, that's just knowing based on 30 years of running them all on the dyno. So I've run something that's close to what people are describing and I could tell them what it makes. But to run boosted stuff, you just need the NA power and then multiply it by the pressure ratio. And then you could determine, like, at, you know, if you have a 400 horsepower motor NA and you're running 14.7 pounds of boost, it's going to make 800, or that's a good starting point. If he doesn't have enough timing, he's trying to run pump gas, doesn't have an intercooler, yada, 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 then you start subtracting a bunch of stuff away from that. Or resources used besides the dyno. I don't use simulators or calculators or any of that. I use the actual results. Didn't Freiberger and Finnegan put electric leaf blowers on a Pontiac? Yes. If you have something that forces more air into the motor than it can ingest of itself, naturally aspirated, then it can help you make more power. That's how all forced induction works. This was done long before Freiberger and Finnegan did this, We did this a long time ago. I didn't do it, but the guys from there was a guy that had a SHO Taurus at the show shop, and he used an electric leaf blower, and his was just a plug-in one, plug into 110, and because this is before the battery operated ones and then the gas powered ones, or he didn't have that, and so he did that, and the leaf blower would support enough airflow to make some boost, 1.5 pounds or whatever, down low, but didn't support enough airflow to make any boost, because it didn't have enough airflow to support that, didn't make any boost like at the top of the RPM range. So he could make more power down low, just not up top, which is why Finnegan and Freiberger did multiples of those, because then you have enough airflow to support that. Not sure if you've already talked about it, but there's a typical boost level where cooling effect of gas through the carb stops being enough to keep intake temps acceptable. I don't know what that is. I know that what happens is, with a roots type supercharger, as you go up in pressure, you go up in blower speed relative to the naturally aspirated power output. If you start going up in blower speed, that blower is not efficient at high blower speeds and or high pressures, because it's not an efficient, it's just an air mover basically. It's just grabbing air from one side, moving it to the other side. And then when it does that, it's trying to hold all of that air that it just moved over to the other side, and then we see that as boost. A twin screw actually has like internal compression, and a centrifugal blower is much more efficient at this, and so is a turbo. So at high pressures, they're just not very good at that. And so you get, what you have is, okay, it's not bad, it's not bad, and then all of a sudden it starts getting really bad. And then the charge cooling that you get from like the carburation is not enough to keep that cold. Is the Trailblazer S and late model truck intake the same? I think that it is. I've been told that the late model truck has a different size throttle body, but maybe I've never seen them side by side to see what the difference is. The Volvo Super Turbo is electric. So does it run? My question is, does it have exhaust flowing through it? If it has exhaust flowing through it that spins a turbine and that spins a compressor, then that's a turbo, even if it has an electric assist. If it's just spun by a electric motor and not exhaust, then it is a supercharger. That's my definition. I want to see a Van Dyne Super Turbo on an engine. Compressed air supercharging, definitely supercharging and awesome. Where will the gains be when upgrading from factory L92 throttle body to a 112? On a stock motor, you won't see any, especially if you're using the stock throttle body. I mean, if you're using the stock intake manifold, which is designed to run a 90mm throttle body. The opening is not big enough to run a 112 throttle body on it. So doesn't matter what size, how big the throttle body is, if you put that on an inlet that's 90mm, you only get 90mm worth of flow. You don't get the 112 or 125 or 250 or whatever it is. Yeah, Dan, this was a plug-in leaf blower. So what they did was they ran it on, because the Deem at the show shop had a chassis dyno. They had a dyno jet, and they just plugged the leaf blower in, and the guy stuck the leaf blower, and we're like, dude, he goes, oh no, this is good. This is really going to make boost. We said, it's going to make this much boost, and then it's not going to make any boost because it's not going to be able to keep up. That thing doesn't flow enough. Oh yeah, it does. This is like a supercharger. I'm like, well, no, we all want it to be that, but it's not going to be that. It's going to be that maybe at the very beginning, and that's exactly what happened. Some of the large centrifugal superchargers take 500 horsepower to turn high boost. I heard a centrifugal supercharger takes less power to drive it than a roots blower does by a lot. It's a lot more efficient in terms of that. And then a twin screw is also more efficient than a roots blower. Some of the roots blowers take an astronomical amount of power to drive. Like a top fuel blower takes, I'm sure anymore, they take 1,000. I build the engine for what I want, and whatever it is, that's fine. Definitely not putting wrong components in to make a dyno number. Someone could steal a motor from a hybrid. I like the idea of the old school external combustion supercharger from the guys who made the rocket axles. I like those. Those are awesome. That's like totally like, this will be fine, right? There's no safety issues here. $1471 takes about 900 horsepower to run. F1, F2, F3 Pro Chargers use a lot of crankshaft horsepower. Yeah, if you have a supercharger that's capable of 3 or 4 or 5,000 horsepower, it's going to take a lot to drive it. I've seen numbers on a 2650 run at 20,000 RPM and 20 plus pounds of boost, and it was, I think it was up near 300 horsepower to drive that one. It was a lot. That was actually on a blower dyno where you get good information. 671 in the house. We got 2 more minutes. I know about top fuelers. So you're telling me I need to strap my M18 leaf blower to the intake of my 2.2 S10. Help me get up to speed before the mile marker. Yeah, if you have a gas powered one or a cordless one, it works good. Have you seen the turbo AI printed for the Aero Spike? I don't know what that is. Rocket axle was surely an Uber Chad moment. I can't believe that someone said, you know what we should do? Okay, we made one for ourselves. We should sell these. This would be totally fine. The Audi SQ7 is an electric supercharger, electric motor connected to the compressor with no turbine. Okay, yeah, that's it. The blower dyno would be cool to see, but I think I'd rather see a Spintron. Yeah, a blower, I've never seen a blower run on a Spintron, but the blower dyno is what determines how much power it takes to drive the supercharger. I should have bought the leaf blower when it was $90. Doubling the atmospheric pressure doubles the horsepower, so less boost would be necessary for the same result with an electric driven blower. Well, you can't double the power output by doubling atmospheric pressure on a supercharger. That doesn't work because you have parasitic loss associated with driving the blower. You can do that with a turbo. You know, both Spintron and a blower dyno. Yeah, I guess the Spintron could calculate that, right? But the Spintron is doing something different. You have to have a lot of other things hooked up to the blower to measure that stuff because of back pressure losses. I don't think that there's much power loss from a turbo setup. TBSSs are for cathedral port, later L92s are for rec port. Yeah, but there's a later model cathedral port intake manifold that's not a Trailblazer SS, that's not an early truck manifold. That's the one I'm talking about. I'm not talking about a LY6 intake manifold. We're talking about a later cathedral port manifold. 2 minutes, yeah, 2 minutes left. How long did how did that Borg-Warner turbo spool so quick in that test you had years ago versus the VS turbo back pressure? I don't know which Borg-Warner one you're talking about. And an engine dyno is not a great place to do spool tests. I made an electric supercharger, which was compounded into an S362, took about 20 horsepower, electrical power to turn, 5 PSI off idle. I was going to say, if it took 20 horsepower to drive, it wasn't supplying very much airflow. Blower dynos usually use a 500 horsepower engine to spin a huge flywheel. Then they engage the blower and get the data. The Kenny Bell one has a 500 horsepower 383 that I built for them. It's an LS that they use to spin the blower. But then they regulate blower speed and inlet and then discharge and monitor airflow in and out. They monitor temperature, obviously. It's a lot of stuff. Good afternoon from the Great Barrier Reef. What's going on, man? I definitely want to go there. I'd rather see a Spintron given the choice. I think the lessons would be more applicable in general. Yeah, if you want to know something different than blowers, yeah, then the Spintron would be good. Someone needs to make clutches for roots blowers. I know. I'm surprised that Centerforce should have done that back in the day. They should have done their dual friction clutch or whatever. They should have done that just for SEMA. I mean, I think that would have been cool for them to do a clutch assembly, just even just as a gee whiz thing. I'm surprised that they didn't do that, because it would have been like the hookup on an AC compressor, but it would have been cool to do it with their, they could have made it look like their clutch. Then it would have been cool. And on that note, it is time to go. See what happens when we all have fun? Can't we all just get along? On that note, it is time to go. I'll see you guys all tomorrow. And we're ending.